The following is intended for mature audiences only.
Welcome to the news from La La Land podcast. Yeah, that's right. It's the news from La La Land, where two siblings with a strange and sheltered past share their story and unpopular opinions through pop culture, philosophy,
and creative nonsense.
Yes, thank you, Theodore. Nicholas. I'm your host, Sarah Sokol, here with Nicholas.
Hello. Every time I talk, it's going to be a different accent. This is going to get difficult, but...
How many accents are you capable of doing successfully?
I have two. My high fantasy accent.
What about the sheltered past?
Oh, that's true.
Your sheltered past.
Ah, yes.
The old turtle accent.
That will be revealed later. It's too soon.
Perhaps I should go into my offensive German accents that I've been using for my audiobook recordings.
Oh, I won't be able to beat that.
Well, Nicholas Sokol, tell me, what have you been up to this week? This is not an interrogation.
But we have ways of making you talk.
Exactly. Anyway, what you been up to this week?
Oh, man. Well, actually, in our other, first podcast recordings here, you may notice that sometimes I have a little bit of a nasally voice, a little more than I might normally have, because I've been fighting a sinus infection for a long time, which is just one of the many ways in which this particular section of the podcast has been such a long time coming.
That's true. One of the many, yeah.
We've had a series of technical mishaps that's resulted in us, this being the third time that we are recording this section of the podcast.
Yes, if you have ever read the Dresden Files, you will know that any creature of great power and magic is generally disliked by technology, and that's what I'm considering myself to be, a great creature of power and magic who technology despises, not a stupid person who accidentally deletes files.
You are an urban wizard.
Exactly.
Well, and some might see this as a message from God to change the subject. But actually, speaking of the subject, I might add a quick disclaimer that if you, like God, are extremely uncomfortable with the subject of sex, sorry, and when I say God, I am talking about a specific version of God. You know, the one I'm talking about.
Some gods are cool.
Yeah.
We should tell you we may offend you in this podcast.
Okay, and that's only because that's part of what we talk about here. It's because we're talking about sex, and our culture, Western culture, especially in America, our puritanical past, we have a weird relationship with the topic of sex, and it is really actually normal for otherwise very rational people in our society to just get really queasy. And I just wanted to put it out there that this is a sex-positive podcast. We think having sex and engaging in sexual activities, consensual sexual activities, is awesome, and it's okay to do, and it's okay to talk about. And part of the restriction of coming out of the path that we came out of involves special kinds of sex restrictions.
So yeah, we've thought about it a lot over our lives in a lot of different ways, and I personally have struggled very hard to get to a place where I accept myself and my body as not sinful and as beautiful, and as, a union between two people, as something that can be beautiful outside the realms of and dictates of the Eastern Orthodox Church in which we grew up. So yeah.
So we're going to talk about sex and pop culture, and that's going to be the pop culture moment. Here we go.
Pop culture moment.
Yeah.
Yes, today's pop culture moment, we will be discussing the uncomfortable and heavy-breasted topics of sex in media, sex in the church.
It's just staggering under the weight of its own heaving bosom, exactly. This topic. It's just bursting out of the bra of the public self-conscious.
No matter how hard they try to tamp it down. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, we should just acknowledge that, like, we by no means, you and I, brother dear, don't have a unique perspective. Growing up in a conservative, anti-talking about sex thing is probably something a lot of our audience could relate to. Like, a lot of people grew up in a restrictive environment when it comes to sex. Like you said, it's just our culture is like that.
Exactly, yeah. Well, and of course, you're going to hear as we go on that there are some things that are specific to our background that might be kind of unique. But there's definitely that shared element that because of just the history of our country and the religious background here, that there is so much of these shared ideas, especially among religious communities, of ideas like, well, only certain kinds of sex are sanctioned. I think it would be, it's easier to talk about the things that are okay in that environment because, sex outside of wedlock, gay sex, any,
even, it's not, the thing is, like, I think, according to my recollection, it's not even gay sex that's the problem. It's anal sex that's the problem. Right?
No, they say like lying with a man.
But like sodomy is the big sin, right?
Oh, I wonder if God was just looking out for people's buttholes and being like,
yeah, maybe God was just like, it doesn't go in there. It's not sanitary, you guys.
You're not going to invent condoms that are up to that task for another 2,000 years.
Sheepskin is not going to cover it, you guys.
You're going to get E. coli and die.
You're going to get E. coli of the dick, my child. Anyway, yeah, so, I mean, listeners probably know all the standard banned things, but, like, what were some things, I guess, specific to the Eastern Orthodox Church?
Well, hang on, before we go to that, like, when you talk about banned things, I mean, I think some of that, just to go a little bit deeper on that, some of it is baked into our language and our culture, the way we talk. We talk about having, being a bad girl or like having dirty thoughts about somebody or, like.
True. Well, and there is a whole generation of people who just will not use the name for genitalia. Like they won't say penis, they won't say vagina. They'll say like no zone or like hoo-ha or
JJ.
Yeah, or like they won't even say I'm having my period. They'll say like I'm getting a visit from Aunt Flo or something like that. Yeah. Which is the common
actually
one.
Getting my period is another euphemism. What you really want to say is I am menstruating, right?
Right, sorry. I'm having my periodicals.
People say PMSing, and that's probably actually the most medically accurate.
Yeah, that's true. But you can say it if you're only saying the letters that each word starts with. So, like, you can say someone has a P, but you can't say penis. You could say they're PMSing, but you can't say it's anything to do with menstruating.
It's all dirty, and it's all, yeah. You only have missionary sex with no birth control in order to have children.
Yes, the purpose of it's procreation because we need more people on this planet.
So we come from the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is kind of a special circumstance. And of course, the Eastern Orthodox Church that we attended was full of converts that came out of the American evangelical tradition. So we had definitely got it from both sides. The Eastern Orthodox Church takes some of that stuff a step further. We had many huge families who would use in our church, they would use no birth control.
I guess it really is the Eastern Orthodox, I keep specifying, is really all about like control, right? Ultimate control over yourself, because everything you're born as is bad, essentially. We're born in sin. We're born in the image of a sinful Adam who just screwed over the entire human race. So we're born in the shit and we have to fight our way out of it with every waking breath by denying every animal instinct, by denying every natural thought, by denying every natural want of of humanity, because that's a sin. That's all against.
Right. And to take that a step further, the Orthodox Church, so it preaches that teaching of self-denial that you were just discussing, but it formalizes it in a way. So it says, the church says, we know that people aren't going to just remember to generally do this all the time. So we're going to say that you cannot have sex on these specific days of the year, and that ends up being more than half the year. You can't have sex on a Wednesday or a Friday, because that's the days that Jesus was betrayed and the day he was crucified.
Right.
Day of the week. If you use that same logic, you would, I don't know, the day of the week that anything bad happened. I mean, there's a lot of bad things that have happened throughout history.
I feel like it's illegitimizing every other bad thing that's happened.
Well, we can't have sex on a Monday because Hitler was born on a Monday.
Oh, but also, sorry, in addition to not having sex, also you can't cook with oil or drink wine.
Or eat meat.
Or eat meat.
Or dairy products.
I don't know if we've talked about this already.
That's the other thing on those fasting days. You can't do anything fun that includes rich foods and sex. And there are fasting days every Wednesday and Friday in the Orthodox Church, but also 40 days before Lent, 40 days before Easter, what we call Pascha, and then 2 other 2-week-long fasting periods throughout the year.
The Apostles' Fast, and then
Dormition. It's just kind of like they stack you up for failure here. Like they set all these restrictions. You've got American sex restrictions, then you've got specific Orthodox restrictions, have lots of babies, only do it on certain days, only in certain positions, you can't have anal sex, you can't have oral sex.
It just leads me to inquire, how would anyone know?
Yes, that's exactly where I was going. It's like you could read my mind. How would the Orthodox Church know?
What are the eyes into your bedroom that they're extending?
Well, first of all, if you don't go to confession prior to communion, rumor has it that communion can burn you, literally burn your mouth, because you're unclean. If you have committed a sin and you have not confessed it to a priest, I was afraid as a child that I might literally be killed by taking communion. It would
just be like hot lava, like swallowing a lump of lava.
There's a story in the Orthodox tradition about that, where a lady, I forget what she did, but man, she didn't confess it. She lied to her priest or something, and then she went to communion and just took the rice and just like burned. She was like screaming, "It burns!" And then that's where Gollum came from. It burns us!
And that woman was Mrs. Tolkien.
Yeah, so that's how they know. Like as kids, adolescents growing up in the Orthodox Church, if you masturbated that week or whatever sexy thing you did, even had an impure thought, and if your priest is feeling particularly spiritually guidance-y that week, they might ask a probing question like, what sorts of impure thoughts, my child?
Yeah. Now you talk about actually confessing masturbation, though. Like, that's not something that I ever did. And I think it may be a product of me being a girl and that people weren't expecting me to have sexual desires. I don't know.
Yeah, when you say not something you ever did, you don't mean masturbating, you mean confessing masturbating.
Right, like I still discovered myself like every human. But
which is okay. God damn it.
Exactly. But I never felt like I had to confess it. I felt like, and I didn't know that you couldn't go to communion after. It just, nobody had ever really told me that. I think it just may have been a male privilege for you.
I think that totally could be, yeah. The repression of man. God.
It's a problem, especially in the Orthodox.
It's been recommended that we try to find a more niche target audience. And I think we've discovered Menists.
Mennonists or Mennonites.
God, shit. If you fall into any one of those groups, you might relate to.
Mennonites, here's to you, shouting you out.
Men's rights activists. You keep jerking each other off and doing your thing.
Incels, come get us.
Man, look at all this pop culture we were throwing out there.
We are on it. But yeah, I mean, it just was that like alienating for you at all? Did you feel like other boys in the church were kind of struggling with the same sort of public shaming in a way when you had to like stand there and not go to communion because you had diddled yourself?
Yeah, actually. So that's a specific thing, which I've realized really more in hindsight. So yeah, the only people that are not allowed to go to communion are women who are riding the crimson wave, having tea with their Aunt Flo, and and men who had jerked off. And everybody lines up in church to go up to communion kind of en masse, like the whole church is gathering into this great line. And the only people left standing in the ranks sheepishly against the walls are the bleeders and the masturbators. And yeah, so it's a weird thing, like to be standing there and looking around and think, I wonder why. Actually, you don't think about the other people though. As a kid, embarrassed kid, you're thinking everyone's gonna know what I did, and so you're looking for a way to hide out in the back of the church during communion time or something. So
you figured like the other kids your age were just stronger than you. They were like better than you.
Yeah, or I wondered if maybe they were just sinners and they didn't confess it. Like, we'd be sitting in line for confession. I'd see some other kid around my age there. I'd be like, I wonder if he's gonna admit to it.
Just be like, come over here, show me your list.
Yeah, so like, but it was only in hindsight that I realized, like, there must have been all these people in there standing around, like, everybody thinks that I'm a horrible person for not going to communion. Will they notice that I haven't been to communion in 6 months?
See, yeah, that is the kind of nice thing about, I guess, being a lady. There was less stigma around not going because, yes, you were experiencing a shameful weakness of the female form, but also you couldn't help it. Like, there's nothing you could do to stop
you were born that way.
That.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which, of course, most people are born to masturbate as well, but that seems to be a more voluntary thing in people's minds.
Okay, so this is the pop culture moment here. So they're like, what about your experience of sex in pop culture? Like, where did you we were isolated a lot, but where did you find pop culture out there?
Well, I mean, where did I find pop culture? Or
Sorry, where did you
sex?
find sex out there? Where did sex find you? Wait, this is we don't have to get real personal about this, but
Yeah, no, I won't. So the first time I touched myself, God
damn
it. No. So I think obviously books. I've said many times they've introduced me to many concepts, but sex was definitely one of them. In terms of pop culture, I feel like it must have been just like tame scenes from a movie or something where two people, like, I feel like it's even implied somewhere in The Princess Bride that they have sex.
Yeah, when you're a young person with raging hormones, if it's implied in a movie that sex has happened, even if it's you see the legs flinging up and they're going under the sheets or something, that's gonna be really it's gonna do hormonal things to you. Inspiring, you might even say.
Inspiring. Inspiring, by the way, it's a Sokolism term for masturbating. When you feel inspired, it means you feel horny. Anyway, I don't know. It's interesting because it's also psychological, because for me, it's like the movies really worked in a way to normalize it when we finally started watching movies and stuff. Like, which was much later, of course, than I guess most people would start experiencing that. But to me, it was like you would see these characters who were not portrayed as sinners, and they're not portrayed as evil people. And they're like, well, they're just about to have sex, or they're clearly engaging in this way that's been so negatively and darkly portrayed to me. Like, little moments like that may not count as seeing sex in media, but to me, it started to turn my mind, I feel like, because I started to see it differently. I just started to think of that. That to me was sex in pop culture And to me, it was being okayed, kind of, in that sense. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, and that might have been happening on a subconscious level for me too. But on a conscious level, I would have adopted the view of our parents and our culture and said, "Oh yeah, this is a good movie, but that's not something they should be doing. That's bad. That's a lot of people do it, but it's bad. It's not good, and they shouldn't be doing that." You know?
Yeah, there is that kind of weird dichotomy, too, of like, everyone does it, but it's not okay, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But what about you? Do you have any, like, I know I just kind of named a bunch of things and went on a rant, but do you have some specific idea in your head of like the first time you sort of experienced sex in pop culture?
Well, no, actually, I share your experience with like just the sort of the harmless, I shouldn't say harmless because like there could be a harmful sex scene. I guess there could be, but this, you know what I mean.
You share my experience, which was harmless.
I share your experience of movies like, we could bring it even a little bit closer to modern times.
Are you sure that's wise?
Year of our Lord 1993. Groundhog Day comes out, and there's a scene where they're making out in a bed, and the girl flings her legs up in the air, I believe, and they definitely do it.
Yeah, kinky. Like, you must have had a turning point, because we've said at the beginning we're sex positive now.
Yeah, that's true.
What was your turning point? Like, what was it? Just kind of maturity, and like, was it when you turned away from the church?
No.
You were like, masturbation is okay now.
I guess it was, I just kept two ledgers, which I'm sure a lot of people do. And it's also what you were talking about, where you have this mode where you're like following this biological urge, you know, and it feels right when you're doing it. And, you know, it's everywhere, you know, it's kind of seeps in. And you just sort of accept that. And then you have this other line of thinking where like you see your code switch, that's off. And now here I'm in religious mode, and that's all wrong. And we're going to go to confession, and it's possible to like maintain two very deep and robust worldviews that are quite at odds with each other. The human brain is just incredible like that. And it was later in life, like probably in high school and then in college, I met people, sort of role models for me in my life, you know, musicians who were just very open and positive about sex and masturbation. And that was really influential on me to see like people that I knew in real life. Like, these are people who don't keep two ledgers. It kind of brought out that dichotomy to the fore for me, to see a real person.
It helped you sort of realize like what you were doing. Maybe.
This is a good person, and they have this idea, and wow, they don't have the same conflict that I do. You know, they're speaking about this totally taboo topic as if it were totally normal, and you know what? As they talk about it, it really does seem normal and natural, you know?
Yeah, and like when you really drill down on the why for a lot of those concepts as well, there aren't very many satisfactory answers to me.
Mm-hmm. It crumbles quickly, yeah.
Exactly. When you just start thinking more and more, and when you're willing to self-examine what I really believe, like if I can have two ledgers, do I really believe that it's wrong? Or, you know, am I turning that on because my natural state is to not believe that? You know, I don't know.
Yeah. Speaking another place where you see sex advertised commonly in pop culture is the magazine aisles at the grocery store.
Oh yeah, but we were allowed to go into grocery stores. Interestingly,
yeah. Our father though sometimes, you know, so like they have the fitness, you know, editions where there'll be girls in less clothing than was deemed appropriate by Dad, so he'd go through sometimes just when he was by himself and just flip over those magazines so you couldn't see them as you were going through the grocery store aisle.
Yeah. I think he always was sort of disgusted by that. He never liked I think that kind of has an old-fashioned view, you know.
And it might not even have been about like, yeah, the sinfulness of it, but maybe more even the kind of like just baseness, you know. Anyway, I guess I should just say that the Orthodox worldview about sex gives you, if you happen to be a person who isn't attracted to that or is kind of turned off by the idea of that exhibitionism or selling things with sex, it gives you a worldview that agrees with you and says, actually, yeah, it's not just base and gross, it's sinful. And here's the
and actually God doesn't like it either.
Yeah. So I know I said we were not going to get too personal, but My first masturbation experience was a full double anal fisting.
How? All right. You were not that flexible.
Yeah, but I am double jointed. And so
I'm so visual and I don't want to keep going down this road with you, please.
I inserted this section at the very end. Very, very easy to cut.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like you had some like real positive mentors in terms of your real life that like sort of led you down the road towards accepting your double fisting.
I should be clear that that's a complete fabrication.
To accept your own sexuality, whatever it may be, no judgment.
No.
If...
It was not double fisting. No, it was a foot and 2 fists.
Yeah, but I feel like, I don't know, I feel like my road has been maybe a bit longer than yours, which is funny because...
Good one.
It wouldn't take much. Dick jokes. No, I just feel like it's kind of funny because I turned away from the church much earlier than you did. But, and I left home at an earlier age than you did as well.
Right, you were younger, yeah.
But I feel like I had a longer road towards, I guess, sexual recovery is how I look at it, which is kind of maybe just due to a lack of like that sort of mentor vibe. I never really had that sort of thing until I was much older and had already gone through some bad experiences that being prepared for the world of dating and the world of sex might have saved me from. So
yeah.
I feel like it's, you know, kind of annoying and funny and a struggle and it's controversial, but on the other side, it's a really serious thing to be educated about sex and educated about
double fisting.
Yeah, and it can really make a big difference in someone's life.
Huge. And in the size of your butthole.
Exactly. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, this is a whole podcast.
I know.
But no, so, I mean, we've been talking somewhat about Dad.
Well, he did turn magazines over. That was where he came into the story.
But he's, like, he was a huge part of all that. And I would say that the sexuality is probably my least favorite aspect of our upbringing, which is saying a lot because a lot of people... Or which is not saying a lot, either way. Because a lot of people have had way worse upbringings than that. So... You know, I don't want to make this a negative thing at all. I still really enjoyed everything about how we grew up, but just this was my least favorite aspect of it, that we had that restriction that so many other people also have.
Yeah. So we might end the section here by reaching out to our audience members, and actually if there are, well, maybe we don't want to actually solicit this.
Yeah, so audience members out there, like, what's the weirdest sexual thing you've ever done? And like, how did you come to terms with that? Or did you feel any sort of shame associated with it that was external from culture? Yeah, tell us about your double fisting experience.
What is your double fist? Don't actually do that. But if you did come from I guess what I really want to know what I would love to know from people out there is if you come from a culture that has kind of a specific restriction around sex that, you know, that you had to deal with or overcome.
Yeah, tell it not just about sex, I guess any pop culture that you've been shut down on, but specifically sex, because sex makes everything more interesting.
And it makes the world go round. Well, let's talk about Sokolisms. We got a little bit of time left here. Let's go to the Sokolism of the day. I bet we have a story from our Sokol past. Just another one of the ways that we deliver more Sokol action to you here in the news from Lalaland.
It's going to be a high action, high intensity, high work output section of Sokolism of the day. Sokolism of the day. Nick, we are recording. What are you doing?
Just jobbing up for safety, sir. A common Sokolism you might hear in our house. So, jobbing up for safety, sir.
It's an indisputable argument. I literally have nothing to say against it.
You're like, well, that sounds important. You should keep doing that.
Exactly.
So you have to give a little backstory on this then. So joving up for safety well, it was something Dad said when he was drinking a cup of stiff cup of tea. He drank these incredibly strong cups of tea with a couple of bags and a tiny little cup, and he'd steep it for a long time. And it said, jobbing up for safety. Which comes from his mountain man days when he was a hotshot firefighter. He had a crew of guys that would get helicoptered into these forest fire zones to do cleanup and firefighting. And his crew was called the Marble Mount Hotshots.
Surely you've heard of us.
Yeah, and so the Marble Mount Hotshots, surely you've heard of us, would drop into a fire, and they do all this crazy long hours, digging trenches and stuff like that. And then the fire would start to die down, and they'd be doing cleanup, and the guys would kind of sometimes gather around in these camps and take breaks, and they would make coffee and build fires and eat food. And they would have all these crazy games, actually, that they would play. Ones where they would, play with axes and try to chop tiny things up, like aspirin pills. Another one where they would two people would build rival bonfires, and someone from the other group would have to jump over the opponent's bonfire. And they build them higher and higher.
Just your classic, kids having fun in the forest.
Yeah. And then the crew leader or the fire chief would come by and say, "What are y'all doing over here?" And they'd hold up their mugs and say, "Job it up for safety, sir."
I always wondered, if the humor that was in all those stories, like the Marble Mountain Hotshots, surely you've heard of us. That's such a dad joke kind of thing. I always wonder if, his humor litters those stories because he hung out with people that were, funny like him, and he, injected that life into it, or if it's just him telling us the stories that gives it that funny dad life, Or maybe
That's
it's
true.
both, I
I've
don't
met
know.
a couple of his friends from back then, and they seemed like kind of really quiet, chill guys. I do sometimes wonder how much of that Dad brought to the milieu there. So, the other thing that they would do in those get-togethers was make Pulaski ladders. So a Pulaski is like a giant axe pick that you use for digging trenches, and they would huck them at the trees, yeet them, you might say, at the trees. And they'd stick in and they'd take turns throwing them, so it'd make a ladder all the way up the tree. And Dad demonstrated that one to us one time. I don't know if you remember going out in the backyard, and he threw it from across the yard at the tree, and it stuck right in. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember that. I remember when I took up hatchet throwing and knife throwing for a while, a very short while. And he was always very excited about that, and he would want to do it with me whenever he was out working in the yard and stuff. But I don't think I ever saw him heave a whole Pulaski into a tree, or I at least maybe saw it and don't remember it.
Yeah, I remember hatchet throwing also. And see, so I wonder if some people might listen to the first section of the podcast, and say, yeah, maybe that's pop culture. But they might be disappointed that it's not up to the minute pop culture. Well, now, by this second section, the Sokolism of the day, you get to see why we have to separate the pop culture to see how far we were removed from anything related to pop culture. I mean, we were in the backyard throwing hatchets at the sycamore tree.
We can talk about Groundhog Day, or we can talk about hatchet throwing, so you just can take it to your choice. Anyway, we're not talking about sex in this section.
God damn it.
Jeez.
Yeah, stay away.
I feel like 2 more dad anecdotes.
All right. Anecdote number 1. In Dad's mountain man days, he used to wear a watch with a note that taped over the face that said, "Now!" with an exclamation point on it. He wore the watch around, but it didn't tell time anymore.
Yeah, you'd think he could have just written the word "now" on his hand.
I think it was a performance art thing for him.
I feel like he was such a weird convergence of religion, growing up Catholic, and also that extreme hippie mountain man thinking, wearing a watch that says "now," and But they would smoke weed, him and his friends, and then they would call it the sacrament. They would be passing around the sacrament, which Nick, my dear brother Nicholas Sokol, has written a poem about.
I did, yeah. This poem feels more finished.
Yeah. Do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it?
Can you read it in the right kind of voice?
I will read it in my sexbot voice.
No. This needs to be read as though you have a pipe sticking out of one corner of your mouth. A long wooden Gandalf pipe needs to be hanging out of the corner of your mouth as you read this.
I think your voice might be best for it then, even though you're slightly sick.
Oh, here it is. Remnants of my Catholic past drift in sacramental ash to settle in the rafters as my brain comes unmelted. I still make out the scattered dates of a calendar from 1968, torn in tattered strips, evidence of the time I've been burning. Wrapped around my wrists, a face reminds me of the things that used to bind me. These days, a casual glance catches the hands just in time to see the stroke of now.
Bravo.
That accent was it was trying to drift into a few different places throughout the course of that.
I feel like it was just a very good standard fantasy accent.
Yes, a fantasy accent.
Yes. With a slight hint of Sean Connery.
Yeah, I think I was actually copying a voice from a fantasy novel that I listened to, an audiobook, actually.
Oh.
It's called The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro, who doesn't actually write fantasy novels, but his latest novel was a fantasy. And there's like a Knight of the Round Table in there, and guy talks with that voice.
Yeah, well, I think the voice works well, although it's not what our dad's voice sounded like, and this is kind of from his perspective, I feel like, but at the same time, it really works to capture the, I don't know, the spirit of it.
I don't know. I imagine like a grizzled old man in a dark cabin lit up only by fire, and you see like the coals in the end of the pipe smoking and burning, and he's just kind of like mumbling, musing this to himself.
I still make out the scattered date of a calendar from 1968.
Yes. So the funny thing about this episode, I realized the structure of it is that imagine this episode is like a rocket ship. We're in it. So the rocket ship is, for one thing, it's shaped like a dildo. That represents the sex that we've been talking about.
Right.
As every rocket ship is shaped like a dildo, but this one is particularly phallic for some reason.
Right. Well, I think it's the smoke that's forming the shape of two balls underneath it.
Thank you. Yes, the afterburners. Fire scrotal afterburners.
They fired my scrotal afterburners.
Oh my god. And God, you're getting away from my perfect analogy here, which was that we start out close to Earth with pop culture, right? But as we get further into the stratosphere, we get into the Sokolisms, which is like kind of an abstract level further away from standard culture. And then from Sokolisms, we go into poetry, which is kind of like Sokol poetry. Like, oh my God, we're getting further afield. And now we have reached the next section of our podcast, which is pointless conjecture.
Pointless conjecture in outer space.
How was that for a segue? A dildo rocket from Earth launches into space, and I literally launched the next section.
I mean, it was brilliantly done, and I think you should just carry on exhibiting your brilliance by asking me.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
You gotta come up with a like somebody comes up to you at the dildo rocket point. They're aiming the dildo rocket at your chest and say, do a dance that's never been done before in the history of mankind.
Oh, man. Is it cheating to now say the dildo rocket dance?
Describe the dildo rocket dance, and I will tell you.
All right, so I imagine that it goes along with like a poppy 80s ballad or something that's like with a lot of like drum fills.
Like do 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 do.
Yeah, so that would be the music. The dance is you're like pushing your palms downward over your pelvis repeatedly as you're like, what's that ballet move? Plie? You're like plieing backwards as you're pushing your palms down.
No. That's literally the dance from Despacito. You're
No, I'm not
describing
done.
Despacito.
I'm not done. And then once you go down into the splits, you have to like roll over into a birth giving position.
Oh, shit.
And then you like sort of clutch your ankles and then you just frog hop. And then it just goes into a frog hop. And then you launch yourself up into a high leaping kick, but you have two wires attached to your shoulders and you get pulled up into the rafters of the performance space.
Oh my lord. Thank you. All right.
That's how you
Nicely
do
done.
the rocket dildo.
Wait. Can you repeat that? I need to write it down.
It's pretty simple. You start with the Despacito dance, and then it goes into birth giving, then a frog hop, then launch into outer space.
Wow, I feel like this is really it's also symbolic. You've got some great symbolism there. So Despacito dance, a hoppy Despacito dance. You've seen this music video, right? They're literally like pelvic thrusting, smashing their pelvises together with concussive force.
From what I hear, it matches the lyrics.
Oh yeah, I speak Spanish pretty well. It's a steamy song.
Wait. This is a safe space. Tell me the steamiest line from Despacito.
You think I just know the lyrics of Despacito?
Yeah.
We'll come back to Despacito. We'll do a pop culture moment on Despacito.
Okay.
But we keep getting sidetracked from my awesome analogies. Okay, you got sex, the most earthly thing, right? And then childbearing. And those things represent the cycle of life, which is just repeating on and on and on until you evolve into something that escapes the planet and rockets in. Wait a second. Shit. It's the same analogy that I already used.
It's the rocket dildo analogy. That's why my dance is so brilliant.
You're gonna have to call this episode the Rocket Dildo Analogy. RDA.
Yeah. Well done.
Shit. All right. Well, I suppose you probably have a pointless question for me, but I have a hard time believing that it's going to be more pointless than the one I just asked you.
You may be right there. It could have the point of making me feel good about making you feel bad. It just depends on how everything works out. A little schadenfreude for you tonight.
Oh my god.
You and I have talked at some point in the past about MASH, and we didn't know what it was, but now we do. Tell me 2 jobs that you would hate to end up working.
2 jobs that I would hate
Yes.
to end up working. All right. Anything in sales, but I feel like that's kind of cheap to say anything in
You
sales.
could say that.
Well, I should.
Cars, women.
No, cars become women. Yeah. No, I'm trying to think of a job that.
Like something you didn't really believe in, like Disney passes or something like that.
Yeah. Packages that I'm a Disney package salesman, and I sell like trips to cruise ships and Disneyland, like discounted, and it's like during COVID time, but I still have to like convince people to do it.
That it's going to be safe and you're going to be taking precautions.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
All right, that's one. And then the other job that I wouldn't want to do is, I would say, any kind of an animal masturbator, because I already have like a huge problem with factory farming, and I don't eat the products of factory farming. And so if you had to work at a factory farm, that'd be the worst. And then the worst job there is probably jerking
masturbate
off
them.
the male to collect semen to create more animals at
Oh, yeah. That does sound really bad.
like a pig masturbator. Like that could be your job.
Oh,
I'm sure they call it maybe an inseminator,
an inspirer.
an inspirer, and cows are like. I wonder if those guys ever get really good at it, and maybe they do like 2 cows at a time. Or they get their feet involved and then maybe they can
I
get
don't-
like
I
3
feel
or
like-
even 4 cows.
They've got to have machines that collect it, right?
No, they wouldn't be able to control it. They'd like
What? They
accidentally
have
set it too
machines
high.
that milk them.
It wouldn't be like just jerk their dicks off by accident or something.
Are you one of the weird morons who don't trust robots?
Okay, I might be having a little bit of like penis sympathy right now. Like the idea of a robot grasping my manhood
So what you're saying is
terrifying.
what would be even worse than being the pig masturbator would be being the pig robot arm masturbator operator.
Man, this game MASH is not so bad after all.
All right. We're like a quarter of the way through. We got to keep going.
Okay, all right.
So now we need 2 jobs like your dream, ideal, any universe jobs. 2 of them.
Okay, so this could be a fantasy job that doesn't really exist.
Well, I mean, I get comparable to what you said you would hate, so I guess not
Okay.
too crazy.
I think a job creating music would be awesome. But
Composer.
and maybe it's one where I hang out in the studio all the time and I don't have to like book gigs or hang out with a lot of interact with the public very much. I'm in a studio and I've got plenty of time and funding and I'm creating music and I've got this community of musicians around that are like always there to record and make music with, and then I sell that music on the internet and people like it. And then maybe like a couple of times a year we put together like an epic concert. Yeah. Okay, that's a sweet job. Essentially
Okay.
musician.
Exclusive, rich, but not famous, except once or twice a year, musician.
I guess he could be famous, but he just doesn't have to like make a lot of public appearances.
That definitely exists. All right. And then another job that you would really like.
I don't know, something adventurous, just something where you get to
Like
be
Hawaiian
outside a lot, like an adventure.
surf instructor.
Sure, yeah, mountain guide maybe. Actually, there's people that make a living just climbing the mountains and not having to guide people who don't know how to climb mountains.
Ooh, mountain climber. That's a good one. All right, I'm going to say mountain expert.
Thank you. I appreciate you adding that part of speech.
Yeah, well, it's your dream. I was going to do 2 more categories, but this is going kind of slow. So I'll say we'll do 1 more category. 2 celebrities, of course, if you weren't married to a beautiful, lovely, adoring woman.
Of course.
2 celebrities that you would love to end up with and 2 celebrities that you would despise to end up with.
I don't. How do you expect me to know all these celebrities?
Well, like, it could be anyone. It could be like you love Joe Rogan and you hate Joe Biden. I don't know. I'm only thinking of Joes.
All right. Let's see. It's easy to come up with people that you wouldn't want to be with. I think you could really just pick a lot of people in the Trump family.
Let's go down the line.
Yeah. Trump and Melania, probably.
Okay.
Near
Yeah,
the
because they
top.
would like gang up on you and stuff.
And then celebrities that I would want to. What do you mean by be with?
Like they become just part of your life. They like take care of you and they're romantic, but it doesn't create any problems in your current life.
Oh wait, so I'm being with them like we're hanging out. Like I'm not dating them.
I'll say, yeah, they're like your close bosom friends who support you, and occasionally they do expect blowjobs, but it's not a big deal.
Okay, you're making this a lot more difficult than it needs to be.
I'm saying you have a consensual, mutual, adult relationship that doesn't interfere with your current life.
Oh my god. Well, I've always had kind of a crush on Owen Wilson.
That's true.
And keep in mind here that I don't know anything about celebrities. I'm not the person that like goes and reads the articles about what they're up to or
No, this is
interviews what they're like. This is like based on just kind of persona in movies that I like.
the person who taught me literally used Ash Ketchum,
I don't know who that is.
the Pokemon guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So like, I'm telling you, you're fine. Just this
All
is
right.
what it's supposed to be.
Owen Wilson with his cute little crooked nose. And,
Yeah. What about that one you always said looked like a human German Shepherd or something?
Who?
Golden Retriever. Oh, Matthew McConaughey.
Oh yeah, he does look like a golden
You
retriever.
like that Matthew McConaughey thing?
No, Matthew McConaughey seems like he might be kind of a dick.
I bet you would get along. He's a professor at Harvard, apparently.
What, really? Oh.
I think so. Let me just Google that to confirm.
You're not allowed to further educate yourself about pop culture on this podcast.
Oh, yeah. See, is he a professor? Oh, it's not at Harvard. It's at Moody.
Moody, Harvard.
Same thing. Anyway, back on track.
Yeah, another celebrity.
Not Matthew McConaughey, you bitch.
I don't know. Can I hang out a bunch with like Jackie Chan?
Yeah, I can arrange Jackie Chan for you.
Me and Jackie Chan and Owen Wilson all sit around and like watch Bruce Lee movies together.
Oh, that would be nice, but that's not a possibility. This is a game about choices and a lack of them.
Okay.
So what we do now is I'll just show you the layout. So up here we have the letters MASH. That's the name of the game. And then you have two lists, two with your choices.
I can't
here.
read those.
It's fine. You don't need to read them. We just discuss them.
Oh, okay.
So now what you do, okay, so I have to draw a spiral. It was 7 for me, but it'll be different for you. I have to draw a spiral and you don't look, but tell me when to stop. So I'm starting the spiral now.
Spiral, 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 go until you blow. Stop.
Okay. So now I have this spiral here, and you count each line of the spiral. So 1, 6.
Okay.
So your number is 6. And then you just
I didn't know this was going to get into numerology. I'm getting creeped out over here.
Yeah. And then you start counting from the top to 6 over and over, and then cross off number 6 each time until you have only a few options. So this will take me a second.
Okay. Are things looking good? Please tell me they're looking good. I could use some good news.
Things aren't looking good.
Let me guess. Me and Matthew McConaughey. No, me and Donald Trump are pig masturbators together.
All right. So I have a little bit of good news. You're working as a mountain expert.
Cool.
So you're climbing, you're getting paid to climb. Every once in a while, you'll take people out there if you want. That's great. It may be you spending so much time away from home because you're unfortunately companioned with Donald Trump.
Oh, no!
Yes,
God
the
damn
worst. Yes. And you will be living in, this is when you discover what MASH stand for. Mansion, apartment, shack, house. And you will be living in a house. In fact, probably the White House.
Oh, no!
With Mr. Donald J. Trump.
I can create a plausible scenario here where somehow Donald Trump decided to marry me as a publicity stunt. Like, to marry a dude, like a no-name dude, as a publicity stunt. And somehow I went along with it because this is MASH. And then I got so sick of being around him that I just started escaping to the mountains. And then I got good at it and people started paying me for it. And then I used it as an escape.
Yeah.
So tell me, Nick, why do you climb? Why do you do it? You risk your life every day. And we notice that you don't climb with ropes or any protective equipment.
And we notice you're often flipping off the sky.
Cursing the sky and hanging from a cliff with one hand. Why?
Why is that? What inspires you?
Well, I'm hoping to die to get out of this life. Well, we have waxed long on this episode, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I think this has been a very productive episode of the news from La La Land. I think everyone is going to end this episode feeling very invigorated and inspired. And I just want to tell you, this has been the news from La La Land, where the rockets all look like dildos.
And they soar into outer space to populate other universes.
The theme music for this podcast was written and recorded by Nick and Sarah Sokol. And the music you are hearing right now was performed by the band Nuage on their album Neuf, available now on iTunes and Spotify. News from La La Land is a production of Voice of Sokol. To learn more about Voice of Sokol and the rest of Sarah's creative content and services, visit voiceofsokol.com. Thanks so much for listening, and please drop us a line at voiceofsokol@gmail.com. We would love to hear your feedback.